We spend a lot of time here at Notre Dame studying written texts. But as we've gotten older, too, we know that there are living texts, both of our own lives and the people that we come into contact with. So through your experience of people coming on this executive education program, what are some of the things that you've learned about the search for meaning in people's lives?
Well, people truly want that connectedness. They want to be part of something larger than themselves. They're seeking ways to feel accomplished and to feel fulfilled in their work. And for most of us, it is a lifelong struggle. It's a very human experience. And I'm recalling one individual in particular who struggled with this clearly. It's a bit of a cautionary tale in that he had a string across his workstation, and on that string were paper clips. There were paper clips on the right side, there were paper clips on the left side, and he literally began his workday every day swinging a paper clip from the left to the right side. And I asked him about that, and he said to me, well, Sharon, each paper clip is a day at the office. And so by swinging the paper clip to the right side, he knew that that was one day closer to retirement. And so here's an individual who clearly the paycheck did not make the equivalent to purpose in his work.
Yeah, and I know as well, Dominic, that in your work, you're dealing with very highly accomplished professional people as well. And yet there's often, just because a person has some kind of profession doesn't necessarily mean that they have meaning. So what do you find in the workplace of people who are looking for meaning?
You know, that's true. You can look at physicians, nurses, teachers and say, oh, you have all kinds of meaning in your life. But that's not always their experience. And what I find is that people have all kinds of meanings in their lives, and that people hit points where they go, I don't know what the meaning is in my job. For example, one physician a couple of years ago, and actually this happens regularly after a residency program, this physician said to me, you know, I don't feel like the loving, caring physician that I used to be. And I'm wondering how I'm going to continue in this profession this way, because I don't like the way I look right now. I don't like the way I feel right now. Even though anybody on the outside would say, oh, you have all the meaning in the world, you're wonderful, she didn't feel that inside at that time.
You know, one of the things we do here, I know in my classes, we kind of help students reflect on what's going on inside the human heart, and that is what are the deeper aspirations of the human heart. And so it's just a moment of time for kind of a larger journey, but I think it's a question we ask again and again. You've been working in clinical psychology, and so you've been listening to the inner life of people for a long period of time. What do you learn about the human heart in that process?
You know, when you ask people what's the meaning in your life, that stumps people. But if you get rid of the word and you just think about your life, and when I work with people, a lot of problems, a lot of things that people bring up are about meaning in the sense of what's the purpose of all this? Or what's the why? How should I think about this or feel about this that'll help me carry on? But people fundamentally do want to know what the purpose of it all is. Even if they can't figure it out, even if it's a short-term one, people struggle to find ways to carry on in difficult times.
Yeah. And Sharon, you're working with people who just, had a period of time out in the workplace. They might have, accomplished certain professional benchmarks, but at the same time they recognize there's something more. What happens when they come to you? What kind of process do you put them through?
I think that most enjoy that rare and wonderful opportunity to kind of take a step back from the busyness and to simply be. And take the opportunity to introspect, to look inside and say, who am I at my essence? What are my core values? Do my core values align with my organization's core values? Do I feel that those are in harmony? Are they disconnected? And really it's an opportunity for them to get clear on their values and to go back into the world more hopeful and feeling a greater sense of purpose.
Yeah. Having that time for introspection, I think, is a bit of a lost art in our society. I know when I go out to a restaurant, it's hard to go anywhere without being bombarded by television screens or music or anything like that. We're so plugged into iPods or before our computer screens. How does that affect our search for meaning?
I think it can crowd it out. You know, we can get caught up in the fact of so many distractions. There's a lot to counteract in our modern day world. But when we do and can really tap into our essence and really figure out how do I bring, who am I, what is my authentic self, and how do I bring my whole self into work, it's really when people feel to begin to say, yes, I am myself. I do feel the purpose. I do see the meaning in my work, and it's much more rewarding.
Do you think there's a difference between meaning and happiness?
Yes, there is. I mean, having meaning in your life would be a source of happiness. But if, I'm thinking, a lot of people would say, oh yeah, those are the same. But there are times when happiness is thought is like a distraction, or there's no work to it. I just want to feel good about it, but I don't want to go through anything. If that's your sense of happiness, then that doesn't really equate. But when you follow your heart's desire, as John Donne would say, true happiness lies in that. But it just depends whether you've got a rather superficial, escapist view of happiness, or one in which it's really connected, as you said, Sharon, to the core of who you are.
Do you think there are kind of basic obstacles to meaning? As we look at kind of our search for that, what are some of the things that we put in the way of finding more meaningful lives? Is it a matter of just what's externally out there, or is it something else?
I think there are things internally and things externally. As I said, there's a lot to counteract, and we can become easily distracted, and we sometimes like to be distracted because it can be very uncomfortable. I have seen individuals and leaders in particular who just really have struggled with being still because it's foreign at this point to many of us. And when they are still, things surface, and a lot of those things are uncomfortable. And it's a messy process.
What might some of those things be?
Well, I think that the distractions of looking at others and saying and comparing rather than relating to people. So if I'm busy comparing myself and how do I stack up versus someone else, I can make myself feel better, at least in the short term. It can also distract me from the real work at hand, which is to really look inside and say, who am I at my essence? Do I really have a keen understanding of myself? In order to be fully present to someone, you have to push pause on the tape, and you have to make room for that other person. So I think the comparison is less healthy than the relating.
It can be a goad to, you look at somebody who you perceive as having a fulfilling life. It can be a goad to say, I need to ask that for myself. But I'm with Sharon on that. When you think, well, this is what I should be like, this is what I should feel, this is what should be my meaning, that's going to get you into trouble. And that's really more about externals. You really have to look inside to understand what the meaning is surfacing in your own life.
What do you see going on in that process? What is it that keeps us from wanting to go there?
Yeah, people really, I think about it in terms of fast food psychology or fast food spirituality. When people feel a meaninglessness in their lives, they want an answer. They want a solution. They want a weekend workshop or a book to solve that. And a lot of times I invite them to think about their lives like an iceberg. What you're aware of, your life, your worries, does this matter to anybody, is like the tip of the iceberg. And your life is like mostly underneath the water, and it's gliding along. And so be open to how your life may be much bigger than you can imagine, and to hang in with the meaningless times, because you never know what your life is really going to bring about. I was thinking Jimmy Stewart, It's a Wonderful Life. Old movie, similar message. You really never really know what you're doing right now, what it's going to add up to, how it's going to figure in. And then there are many times when you're going along and you think that it's very meaningful what you're doing, and then you wake up one day and go, wow, this hasn't been my true contribution. It's been something totally unexpected.
Just to build on that, I think that it's very easy to get distracted, and we don't like to feel uncomfortable, and part of this journey requires us being uncomfortable in order to have that examination that's so important to the process of really understanding who we are at our essence and what we stand for and what our values are that enable us to live our lives.
Because we're here at Notre Dame and we try to very consciously look at this from a Christian perspective as well, and to say, how do we look at what Jesus most valued? How do we look at our lives in light of the gospel, and how does that relate to finding meaning? So in your experience, and I know you're working in different contexts, yours has an explicitly kind of religious focus, but you're also dealing with people of other faiths. And whereas people coming from business may have that or they may not have that. But in your experience, what are some of the central values of the gospel that help people find meaning in their lives?
Well, I'll start. I think one of them clearly is faith. And I think work is a wonderful place where we can put our faith into action. We spend so much time in our work pursuits. We put our energy, we invest ourselves, we're committed, we're seeking to make those deep contributions. And so faith can really help us hang on to our hope. When things are going well, it's easy to come by. When things are not going well, sometimes we have to really dig deep to hang on to our faith and to trust that God's plan can be better than anything we envisioned and mapped out for ourselves. So a friend of mine had said, if your faith is not at work, your faith is not at work. And so that's something to be mindful of.
What happens, if we stay with this for a moment, Sharon, what happens when your own personal values conflict with the values of, say, a company that you're working with?
Yes, it's a real problem that I think many, if not most people, struggle with. So once you have the clarity of what your individual personal values are, then you need to take a look at your organization's values. And you need to see, are those in alignment? Is there harmony? Does that free me up to do my best work, to make my deepest contributions? Or am I investing my energy into making a force fit between my personal value and the organization's values? If it is that force fit, I can all but guarantee that energy is being misspent.
So what does faith look like in that context? You said it's central, it's important. But what does it look like as it's lived out?
As people do that introspection and that examination, they say, the alignment is not there. Then I think another value comes into play, and that is courage. Having the courage of your convictions to make that change or to follow that path or that journey, wherever that may lead you, whether it's finding a way to work within that organization that may not be mirroring back you and supporting your values, or if it means you need to find another professional pursuit.
So faith and courage are two that you'd highlight. How about you, Dominic?
I think the value I'd focus on as well would be how can I be the most loving person I can, and how can I help relieve suffering? Looking at that side of Jesus' ministry, whatever you're doing, thinking, how can I love people? How can I relieve suffering? We used to have this big argument in ministry class about, is a welder a minister? And that used to get me pretty hot, because I know a lot of people who are welders, farmers, people that you wouldn't expect to be doing, quote, contributing to in the same ways as helping professions. But I've met people who in those professions are, the bottom line is, do you see what you're doing as contributing to humanity? And if you do, then you are in a helping profession. That's the way I look at it. Because we've certainly seen people who are, quote, in the helping professions who really didn't care about people. And we've seen people who are doing things that we thought, well, that doesn't really do anything. They end up touching people more than you can possibly imagine.
How do we stay centered and positive among negative people or environment?
That's big. One of the ways that I try to do this in my own life and try to help other people is basically saying, okay, this is a really negative environment, and I could easily become like this. It's like a sick building. You can get sick along with the building. But the guiding question I try to have is, what do I want to look like in this negative place? What kind of person do I want to be like? And using that as the way, I was thinking about it for myself at one point in my life, really feeling very negative and cynical, and thinking cynicism and bitterness don't look good on me. And I don't like the way that looks on the people around me. I'm going to do everything I can not to be that way. And then, of course, there are many stories, and I've certainly seen it in the hospital and clinics and other places, where a person is the holdout. They don't go along with the negativity. They hold on, and they're positive. They reach out to people. They listen to people. They reach out to the customers. even though the place is a very demeaning place. I remember a man who said, you know, this place is really tough on everybody. But what I do to keep myself centered is I say, how can I be the best possible person to the next customer? They're my ministry. They're the people that I should focus on. And that's the way they kept going. But there's no doubt that that's a very hard thing to do. And at a certain point, going back to Sharon's point about courage, you have to be able to discern, how long should I be in this place? And should I move on because of what it's doing to me? But on the other hand, maybe the courage also to go against that force.
When you do find yourself in that kind of situation, I think that each one of us can make a very real difference, and we all throw out an energy. And so making sure that the energy is positive and staying connected to that higher meaning or those values that you want to stand for in the world and in your workplace.
At the heart of both of your comments really are the issues of love and suffering. Can you talk a little bit about how those figure into this search for meaning?
Well, it's a process, it's a journey, and it's very much a part of the human experience, I believe. And so that plays out in our play life and our private lives as well as our professional lives. And so I think that it's something that when you have those tough times and those challenging times, and then you experience something that's more rewarding, feels more positive, I think that you just appreciate all that more for having that full spectrum of the experience.
Some phrases we use on this are, what is your spirituality of caring, or what's your philosophy of caring? In other words, when you are in difficult times or working in very difficult situations, what keeps you going? What do you go back to in your faith, in your life, and the people that love you and whom you love? What do you use to keep giving you energy in that?
Can you talk a little bit? I know that you have very practical tools that you implement, both of you, in the areas where you're working, about how you get people to connect, say, for those deeper faith traditions and the values in those traditions that give them strength in suffering.
Well, one of the things I do is encourage people to look at their life like a story, and that things may be in really bad shape right now. You may be lost, you may think there's no meaning right now, and this is chapter 5 of your life. And people's holy scriptures are full of stories. And so one of the practices I invite people to do is to take a story of their lives, wherever they are at right now, like we just tried this project, the whole thing has fallen apart, the people who are guiding us in this project are gone, we've been bought out by another company, what are we going to do? And put that right next to a story in Scripture, like the road to Emmaus. We've lost our teacher, this whole project is worthless, nobody cares about it, everybody who is friends with us is against us now. And you put those two together and you let them work on each other. Sort of like, I haven't actually done this myself, but making fire with a piece of wood on stone with the embers around it, where our experience, our job is that stick, and we put it against the scriptures and we rub it together, and it inflames our experience. It helps us see our experience all differently. So that, hey, you know what? My life is a lot like the road to Emmaus right now, and I was also thinking of Gethsemane. My life feels like Gethsemane right now, and you put it right next to that story, and so that hooks you right into what comes right after that story.
In drawing on the paperclip story, there was an example of someone who really hadn't taken the time or made it a priority to introspect. So taking that time for yourself to pray, to meditate, to journal, to be still. In other words, to give yourself a chance just to connect with yourself is a practice that too often we don't value or we don't think to take the time to do. But actually, in those quiet moments, you really can have glimmers or insights or breakthroughs into, the real purpose of my life is, I am here to accomplish thus and so.
What can we learn from Jesus and his handling of his own work that can help us to find meaning in what we do?
I think Jesus provides inspiration and he also provides practical application. So that's a wonderful combination that we can draw strength from. So when it comes to how you deal with challenging times, how you extend yourself to those who may not want your help or want your direction. I mean, there are all sorts of lessons in there that Jesus provides in very practical ways, but he also then sets such a high bar and example that I think for overall is quite inspiring.
A lot of people, will say, well, I have to lay down my life like Jesus did. And usually sometimes this is with people who are like over-giving. They're like hurting their own lives by doing that. And so I think about other things that Jesus did that people forget, like, I need to get away, and the disciples, and he would get away, go fishing. And other times when it's like, these tables need to be overturned here. People are doing in the temple things that are really against what God is all about. And so there's a lot of interesting, not contradictions, paradoxes, that just working with those stories to give us. And really just Jesus' life, using that as an example of the search for meaning, in a sense that and we don't know exactly the way Jesus was thinking, but certain things lead us to believe that when he was in Gethsemane, when he was dying on the cross, he wondered if it was all lost and it was all over. And I think about that as like, well, if Jesus can lose his way or wonder about that, why should I be any different? And certainly a couple of years ago when Mother Teresa's journals were published, which I'm sure she was not thrilled about, but where a lot of people said, oh, she was in doubt, and she was in doubt. She never was in doubt that she was going to keep doing what Jesus, being a follower of Jesus. But frankly, she didn't always feel those warm, positive feelings of I'm doing God's will. I think those are ways Jesus' life can really put into perspective that, hey, if you don't feel a lot of meaning and fulfillment right now, you're in good company.
I mean, I see many people struggle with being their whole and authentic self at work, and we all can compartmentalize and put up a facade. And so to the extent that we don't do that and we stay true to ourselves in and out of the workplace, I think that's the way God intended the human experience. And so with that in mind, there's just a short stanza that can remind us all about the importance of the gospel values. And it says, "So seek me not in far-off places. I am close at hand. Your workbench, office, kitchen, these are altars where you offer love, and I am with you there."